The advertisement played on every channel. Homelander stood against a backdrop of stars and stripes that practiced smile carved into his face like marble. The tagline scrolled beneath him in corporate-approved fonts. America's greatest hero. Vought International, where heroes belong. It ran for exactly 47 seconds before the glitch hit. Static rippled across every screen in Manhattan. Times Square went dark for 3 heartbeats, then snapped back with something new. Not an advertisement, not a news bulletin, a face. Blue skin. Oversized cranium. Eyes the color of algae, blooms bright and unblinking. The creature wore black theatrical and sharp with a cape that belonged in a stage production. It smiled all teeth and calculated charm. Good evening, citizens of Earth. The voice carried an accent no linguist could play smooth as a late-night host. My name is Megamind. I come from a planet you've never heard of, traveling in a ship you'll never find. I'm here to do something your world desperately needs. The smile widened. I'm here to be your villain. Across the city, hands froze on remotes. In apartments and bars and subway platforms, people stared at screens that refused to change channels. The broadcast wasn't asking permission. It simply was. Megamind continued, hands gesturing like he was conducting an orchestra. Now I know what you're thinking. Aliens. How terrifying, how unprecedented. But let's be honest with ourselves for once. You people love a good villain. You need one. Heroes only matter when there's something to punch. And lately, he paused, mock thoughtful. Well, your heroes have been punching each other's PR teams more than actual threats. Behind him, blueprints flickered into view. Technical diagrams. Schematics that looked disturbingly functional. Then they vanished, replaced by his grinning face. I'll be transparent. I'm not here to destroy your world. That's boring. I'm not here to steal your resources. What would I even do with them? No, I'm here because you deserve a villain with standards. One who actually puts on a show worth watching. The broadcast cut to black. Then every billboard in the city lit up simultaneously, displaying a single sentence in block letters: the Seven are a franchise. Social media detonated within minutes. Hashtags spawned like viruses. Alien invasion trended alongside Votlide and blue skin threat. Memes flooded timelines faster than human hands could create them, which meant bots, which meant someone had planned this down to the algorithms. Cable news pivoted with the grace of a freight train changing tracks. Anchors who'd been discussing the latest superhero approval ratings now scrambled for alien invasion protocols that didn't exist. Experts appeared who'd never studied xenobiology confidently, explaining what the blue skin might indicate about atmospheric composition on the creature's homeworld. Nobody used the word creature for long. By the second hour, he had a name that stuck: Megamind. The alien who introduced himself like a talk show guest and declared villainy like a job application. In a corner office, 70 floors above street level, Ashley Barrett watched 9 monitors simultaneously and felt her blood pressure climb into stroke territory. The PR director for the Seven had handled scandals before. Substance abuse. Manslaughter disguised as collateral damage. That incident with the plane, nobody was supposed to remember. But this was different. This was coordinated. Her phone screamed with notifications. The Vought legal team wanted a statement. The marketing department demanded to know if they should pull the Homelander ads or double down. 3 different senators had already called, using words like national security and immediate response. Their voices tight with the fear of losing campaign funding. She typed out a press release with shaking fingers. Vought International categorically denies any association with the individual claiming to be an extraterrestrial entity. We believe this to be a sophisticated hoax perpetrated by domestic terrorists using advanced biological manipulation. The Seven are currently investigating and will resolve this matter swiftly. It was corporate doublespeak at its finest. It also wouldn't work. She knew that the moment she hit send. Across town, in a studio apartment that smelled like old takeout and regret, Nadia Cross replayed the broadcast for the 8th time. The journalist had built a career on not trusting anything Vought published, which made her unemployable at major networks and extremely popular on independent platforms. She froze the frame on Megamind's face, studied the way his expression shifted, calculated and performative. This wasn't madness. It wasn't even alien, not really. It was theater. "You're not here to conquer," she muttered at the screen. "You're here to audition." Her camera sat on the desk, red light off. She'd been recording a segment about Vaught's latest charity tax write-off when the hijacking occurred. Now she had something better. She picked up the camera, checked the battery, and started a new file. "This is Nadia Cross, and I'm not going to tell you what to think about the blue-skinned visitor. But I will tell you this, whoever he is, whatever he wants, he just did something Vaught's entire legal department couldn't stop. He made you look at something they didn't approve first." She paused, then added, "Ask yourself why that scares them more than the alien part." The video went live 3 minutes later. Within an hour, it had been shared 40,000 times. In Vought Tower's executive suite, Stan Edgar read the preliminary data with the expression of a man examining stock reports. The CEO didn't pace, didn't raise his voice. He simply set down the tablet and looked at the crisis management team assembled before him. "Theories," he said. The head of R&D spoke first. "Genetic modification is possible, but unlikely at this level of sophistication. The broadcast hijacking suggests technology beyond current civilian capabilities. Or military, someone else offered." Edgar's gaze didn't shift. "If the military wanted to embarrass us, they'd use an audit, not costumes." "Next." Ashley cleared her throat. "Public sentiment is fragmenting faster than we can track. The xenophobia angle plays well with our traditional demographic, but younger viewers are treating this like entertainment. Meme engagement is off the charts." And the Seven's response? Silence stretched for 3 seconds too long. Edgar stood. "Get Homelander in here. Now." The conference room door opened 16 minutes later. Homelander entered the way he always did. Cape settling perfectly, smile bright enough to sell action figures. But his eyes tracked to the monitors, still showing Megamind's frozen face, and something flickered behind that manufactured charm. "You wanted to see me?" Homelander's tone stayed light, but his jaw was tight. Edgar gestured at the screens. "Your assessment. Some asshole with a paint job and delusions." Homelander crossed his arms. "I can handle it." "Can you?" Edgar's voice held no inflection. "Because handling it means we control the narrative. And right now, a blue-skinned theatrical reject is getting more airtime than you've had in 6 months." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Homelander's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. They fixed on Edgar with the focus of a laser warming up. "I said I can handle it. Then handle it quietly." Edgar returned to his seat, dismissing the tension like it was a minor stock fluctuation. No cameras, no collateral. Find him, contain him, and let our legal team turn him into a cautionary tale about immigration fraud. Homelander's laugh came out sharp. "You want me to play cleanup crew for some alien publicity stunt? I want you to remember who signs your endorsement deals." Edgar's tone never changed. "The Seven are a brand. Brands don't get upstaged by unvetted product launches. Do your job." The meeting ended. Homelander stood on the tower's roof. 90 seconds later, wind tugging at his cape, the city spread below like a circuit board. Somewhere down there, a blue-skinned freak was playing supervillain and stealing his spotlight. He could find him. X-ray vision could sweep blocks in seconds. Hearing sharp enough to pick out a heartbeat from 1,000 yards. He was the most powerful being on the planet, and some theatrical alien thought he could just announce himself on television like it was open mic night. Homelander's fists clenched. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, he said to the skyline. "They're almost up." He took off, sonic boom cracking across the city, heading toward the last known broadcast origin point. Below, people looked up at the sound, pointing at the streak of red and blue cutting through clouds. America's greatest hero hunting a threat. The cameras would love it. What Homelander did not see, couldn't see, was the warehouse 3 miles south, where Megamind stood in front of a dozen monitors watching every news feed simultaneously. The alien's smile had faded, now replaced by something quieter. Something calculating. He'd gotten their attention. The hard part started now. Megamind reached for a control panel, fingers dancing across buttons that would make MIT engineers weep. Screens shifted, showing heat signatures, cell tower pings, satellite trajectories. The city was a machine, and he'd just learned how to read its code. "Let's see if you're as predictable as your marketing suggests," he murmured. One screen showed Homelander's flight path, tracked through a dozen hacked traffic cameras. Another displayed social media sentiment analysis, the numbers climbing steadily toward critical mass. A third held a countdown timer, 8 hours until the next broadcast. Megamind adjusted his collar, checked his reflection in a darkened monitor, and allowed himself one more smile. Theatrical, yes. Calculated, absolutely. But genuine in its anticipation. He'd spent his entire life being the villain in someone else's story. Now he was writing his own. The city hummed beyond the warehouse walls, millions of voices arguing about what he was and what he wanted. Let them argue. Let them theorize. Let Vought scramble to rewrite their narrative before it slipped through their corporate fingers. Megamind had already won the opening move. The game was just beginning. The billboard lasted exactly 12 minutes before Vaught's digital response team tried to kill it. The 7 are a franchise blinked across 43 electronic displays throughout Manhattan, each one a calculated middle finger to corporate control. Ashley had authorized the shutdown personally, her third ulcer of the year already forming. The text promised it would take 90 seconds. It took 3 minutes. Then the message came back. Same billboards, same font. But now with an addition, try harder. In the war room, someone's coffee mug hit the floor. Ashley stared at the monitors, watching her company's infrastructure mock her in real time. This wasn't a hack. This was a conversation. "Cut the power," she said. Her voice had gone flat, the kind of calm that came right before a complete breakdown. "Physically, send crews to every location and pull the plugs." The IT director, a man whose job description had never included alien contact protocols, cleared his throat. "That's 18 city blocks. Union regulations alone. I don't care if you have to chew through the cables yourself. Do it." They did it. 12 crews emergency protocols, the kind of response usually reserved for citywide blackouts. Within 40 minutes, every compromised billboard went dark. The victory lasted 18 seconds. Then the message appeared on subway screens, bus stops, the Jumbotron at Madison Square Garden during a halftime show. Even the ticker at the New York Stock Exchange, where Vaught's share price was currently performing its own freefall. Nadia Cross watched it happen from her apartment laptop balanced on her knees, 3 browser windows tracking the spread. She'd seen viral campaigns before coordinated releases that looked organic until you traced the money. This was different. This adapted. Every time Vought shut down one vector, 2 more opened. The pattern reminded her of something she'd investigated years ago, a marketing algorithm designed to predict and counter suppression attempts. Except the tech had been theoretical, expensive. Definitely not available to random blue-skinned performance artists, unless the performance artist had built it himself. She opened a new document and started typing. Megamind's second move isn't an attack. It's a demonstration. He's showing Vought that their infrastructure belongs to him now. Question is, what's he planning to do with it? The upload notification appeared before she'd finished the sentence. Her video from last night had crossed 2 million views. The comments section had evolved into a war zone between Vought defenders, conspiracy theorists, and people who just wanted to watch the world's most powerful corporation get humiliated in high definition. Nadia's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring twice before answering. Ms. Cross. The voice was smooth-accented, distinctly not human. I hope I'm not interrupting. She sat up straighter. You're him. I'm flattered you recognized my voice. I've been watching your work. Very thorough. Appropriately skeptical. Exactly the kind of journalism this city needs. Is this the part where you threaten me or offer an exclusive? Megamind's laugh sounded genuine. Neither. I'm simply calling to correct a minor misunderstanding in your latest piece. You suggested I want to control Vaught's infrastructure. Inaccurate. I want to prove it can't be controlled. There's a difference. Nadia grabbed her recorder, hit the button. And you're telling me this because you're one of 3 journalists in this city who might actually report it correctly. The others are too busy checking with their sponsors first. A pause. I'm not your enemy, Ms. Cross. I'm your evidence. The line went dead. Nadia stared at her phone for 5 seconds, then checked the recording. Clean audio. Verifiable. Completely useless without corroboration, which meant she couldn't publish it without looking like she'd staged the whole thing. Clever bastard, she muttered. At Vought Tower, the situation had deteriorated from crisis to catastrophe. Stan Edgar stood in the security center, watching technicians tear apart server racks like they might find the alien hiding in the cooling fans. The CEO's expression remained neutral, but his stillness had a weight to it. Status, he said. The head of cybersecurity looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. Probably accurate. We've isolated the intrusion vector. It's not traditional malware. It's more like... She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound insane. It's like a living program. It learns our countermeasures and adapts before we can implement them. Translation: we can't kill it because it evolves faster than we can patch. Every shutdown protocol we deploy gets absorbed and used to spread further. She pulled up a network diagram that looked like a root system. It's in our advertising feeds, our internal communications, even our cafeteria menu screens. Everything connected to our network is compromised. Edgar absorbed this without blinking. Disconnect everything. Sir, that would mean... I'm aware of what it means. Do it anyway. If we can't control the infrastructure, we don't use it. The technician's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. That includes our social media presence, our brand monitoring, all of it. Edgar turned to face her fully. We go dark until we can guarantee operational security. Inform the board. She disconnected. 70 years of corporate digital presence vanished in stages like watching a city skyline lose power during a blackout. Vaught's Twitter went silent mid-thread. Instagram posts stopped updating. Even the live stream from the Seven's public relations office cut to a corporate holding screen. The internet noticed immediately. Vought Gone Dark trended within minutes, accompanied by screenshots and speculation. Megamind's little program had done what no hacker collective or government agency had managed. It had scared Vought International into abandoning its own infrastructure, in a warehouse that smelled like motor oil and ambition. Megamind watched the disconnect happen across 24 monitors. His smile had faded to something more contemplative, almost disappointed. That was faster than expected, he said to the empty room. The plan had accounted for Vaught's nuclear option, but he'd estimated another 6 hours before they pulled the trigger. Corporate entities didn't like going silent. It made them look weak, uncontrolled. Exactly the image Vought had spent decades avoiding, which meant Stan Edgar was smarter than his marketing suggested, willing to take a short-term loss to prevent long-term damage. Interesting. Megamind pulled up a secondary program, one he'd prepared for exactly this contingency. The ad worm had been designed with multiple deployment phases. Vought had just forced him to accelerate the timeline. He initiated Phase 2. Nothing happened immediately. That was intentional. The new code wouldn't activate until Vought tried to bring their systems back online. They would have to, eventually. A corporation couldn't stay dark forever. The board would panic. Shareholders would demand answers. The silence would become its own scandal. All Megamind had to do was wait. He turned to a different monitor, this one showing news coverage. A political commentator was demanding that the president declare a state of emergency. A Pentagon spokesman was declining to comment on alien threats. 3 separate talk shows were debating whether Megamind represented an invasion force or an elaborate hoax. Nobody was talking about the 7 anymore. Megamind's fingers drummed against the console. Victory should feel better than this. He'd hijacked the world's attention, humiliated a corporate giant, and demonstrated technological superiority that shouldn't exist outside classified military labs. By any objective measure, he was winning. So why did it feel like watching a replay? The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. He pushed it aside, focusing instead on the next phase. The live stream he'd promised would need preparation. The moral trap required careful staging. There were 100 details to coordinate, each one critical to maintaining momentum. But the hollow feeling remained. In Metro City, victory over Metro Man had felt like this. The moment after the triumph, when the cheering stopped and he stood alone with nothing left to oppose. He'd won so completely that the game ended, and endings were just another word for obsolescence. This was different. Had to be. Vought was bigger than any hero, more resilient. They wouldn't fall in one move, which meant the game could continue. The spotlight would stay on. He wouldn't fade back into irrelevance. Megamind checked the countdown again. 7 hours until the next broadcast. Plenty of time to prepare, to plan, to make sure the performance justified the stage he'd built. He glanced at his reflection in a darkened screen. The blue face looked back theatrical and alien and utterly alone. Focus, he told himself. This is what you wanted. The reflection didn't answer. Across the city, in a penthouse that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, Homelander stood at the window and watched the sunset turn Manhattan into a grid of gold and shadow. He'd spent the last 6 hours searching, X-ray vision sweeping through buildings, enhanced hearing filtering through millions of conversations, looking for one specific heartbeat, one blue face. Nothing. The alien had vanished as thoroughly as he'd appeared, leaving only chaos in his wake. Vought's stock was down 11%. Social media treated the whole thing like performance art. And Homelander, the most powerful being on the planet, had been reduced to playing hide-and-seek with a theatrical reject. His phone buzzed. Edgar's name appeared on the screen. Homelander ignored it. Let the CIO handle his corporate crisis. Let Ashley have her panic attack. Let the lawyers draft their statements. Homelander had a better idea. He pulled out his own phone, opened Twitter, and started typing. The verified blue checkmark next to his name carried weight. Millions of followers who hung on every word. He could do more damage to Megamind's credibility in one post than Vought's entire PR department. But his thumb hesitated over the send button. What would he even say? That he couldn't find the alien. That some blue-skinned freak with a camera and a server was outsmarting him. Every response made him look reactive, defensive, weak. Homelander deleted the draft. The sun finished setting. The city lights came on 1 billion points of illumination, creating the illusion of warmth. Somewhere in that grid, Megamind was planning his next move. Probably laughing. Definitely winning. Homelander's reflection stared back from the window glass. Still perfect. Still powerful. Still America's greatest hero. But for the first time in years, the reflection looked like it was trying to convince him. His fist went through the window before he realized he'd moved. Glass exploded, outward glittering as it fell 70 floors to the street below. The wind rushed in cold and immediate, carrying the sounds of the city with it. Homelander stood in the broken frame cape, snapping behind him, and smiled. Let Megamind have his games. Let him play villain and hack billboards and pretend he mattered. When this was over, and it would be over soon, the world would remember why heroes always won. Because heroes didn't need to hide in warehouses. They stood in the light and dared the darkness to do something about it. The smile stayed fixed on his face all the way back to Vought Tower, perfect and practiced and absolutely hollow. The second broadcast arrived at 8 p.m. exactly as promised. This time, Megamind didn't hijack existing infrastructure. He built his own. Across Manhattan, unauthorized relay towers appeared on rooftops like metal weeds, each one broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't have been available. The FCC would have questions later. Right now, they could only watch as the alien commandeered the airwaves with the confidence of someone who'd already read the regulatory handbook and decided it didn't apply. The feed opened on what looked like an abandoned film studio. Stage lights created pools of white against concrete walls. Camera drones circled overhead, their movements precise enough to suggest professional choreography. And in the center, standing beneath a spotlight that could have doubled as an interrogation lamp, was Megamind. He'd changed costumes. The cape remained, but now he wore something closer to a ringmaster's outfit, black, with silver accents that caught the light. Theatrical without being absurd, villainous without relying on cliches. Good evening again. His voice carried that same smooth confidence, the accent now familiar to millions. I promised you a show. I keep my promises. Behind him, the warehouse doors opened. A woman walked out, hands bound, stumbling slightly as she moved into the light. Mid-30s. Professional clothes rumpled from rough handling. Recognition rippled through the viewing audience immediately. Vanessa Chen, Vaught's Director of Public Engagement. The face behind 1,000 press conferences, the voice that explained away collateral damage and reframed scandals as misunderstandings. Not famous exactly, but recognizable to anyone who paid attention to corporate spin. Social media erupted. Hashtags spawned. Megamind takes hostage trending within 90 seconds. Nadia Cross leaned closer to her laptop display recorder, already running. Something felt wrong. Not the hostage situation itself that tracked with standard villain escalation patterns, but Chen's expression. She looked scared, yes, but not terrified. And her hands, supposedly bound, moved with a little too much freedom. Ms. Chen has been very helpful. Megamind continued, gesturing like a game show host, introducing a prize. She's agreed to participate in tonight's demonstration. Haven't you, Vanessa? The woman nodded. Her voice shook when she spoke. Please, just let me go. I have a family. Of course you do. Everyone has someone they care about. Megamind circled her slowly, each step measured. That's what makes this interesting, because in approximately, he checked an oversized watch on his wrist. 17 minutes, this building's support structure is going to fail. Controlled demolition, very precise. The kind of thing that requires weeks of planning and expert execution. He paused, letting the implications sink in. The good news is that everyone here can escape safely. There are clearly marked exits, emergency lights, even helpful diagrams. The bad news is that Ms. Chen is connected to a rather sophisticated restraint system that requires manual override. Someone has to physically release her, which means someone has to stay until the last possible moment. The camera angle shifted, revealing the wider scene. Other people, maybe a dozen, scattered throughout the space. Some cowered behind equipment. Others stood frozen, uncertain. All of them amateur actors from a local theater company, paid well and briefed thoroughly on the safety protocols that Megamind had spent 3 days perfecting. But the viewers didn't know that. They saw hostages, danger, a countdown to catastrophe. Now here's where it gets fun. Megamind's grin widened sharp and performative. The 7 are undoubtedly watching. They're probably already en route. Heroes love a good rescue, after all. Excellent publicity. But here's my question for them. He turned to face the camera, directly eyes bright with calculated mischief. Do you save the people first? Or do you hunt me down? Because I promise you, you won't have time for both. 17 minutes isn't long. Not when you're playing hero. Not when the cameras are recording every choice you make. The feed cut to a split screen. One side showed the warehouse. The other displayed an aerial view of Manhattan, with a highlighted path from Vought Tower to the studio location. Travel time 8 minutes at subsonic speed. Math that made the trap obvious. In Vought Tower's crisis center, Ashley Barrett felt her heartbeat sync with the countdown timer that had appeared on every feed. 16 minutes 40 seconds. The legal team was already screaming about liability. The marketing department wanted to know if they could spin this as evidence of the 7's effectiveness. Nobody was asking the important question, which was whether Homelander would actually save anyone. Stan Edgar stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, expression revealing nothing. He'd already made his assessment. This wasn't terrorism, it was theater. An elaborate stage designed to expose the gap between what the 7 claimed to be and what they actually were. Smart, dangerous, and absolutely infuriating. Get Homelander on comms, Edgar said quietly. Ashley scrambled for the radio. Homelander, this is Tower. We have a developing situation. I'm already in the air. His voice came through crisp clipped. I can see the building. The media is tracking your every move. Multiple news helicopters live feed social media. You need to understand that whatever happens next will be me solving this while you people panic. A pause. I've got this. The connection cut. Edgar's jaw tightened, the only external sign of concern. Homelander was moving fast. Too fast. The kind of speed that came from ego, not strategy. And ego made mistakes. 4 miles away, Homelander descended toward the warehouse, like a missile finding its target. Wind tore at his cape, the sonic boom of his passage, rattling windows across 3 city blocks. He could already see the building, could hear heartbeats inside, could smell the fear that made prey so easy to identify. 13 people inside. One of them, Megamind. The alien's elevated pulse gave him away, that blue-skinned freak trying to play games with someone who could vaporize him with a glance. The spotlight caught Homelander as he landed, cameras swiveling to capture the moment. He touched down with perfect superhero grace, one knee-bent fist against concrete. The pose held for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for good footage before he stood. Show's over, Homelander announced. His voice carried that practiced warmth, the tone that sold action figures and calmed worried parents. Everyone out, now. The civilians didn't need to be told twice. They scattered toward exits, their fear genuine enough, even if their danger wasn't. Homelander barely tracked them. His focus had locked on the figure standing beneath the spotlight. Except it wasn't Megamind. The hologram flickered just once before solidifying into a pre-recorded message. The alien's face grinned from the projection, annoyingly smug. If you're seeing this, then you came for me first. Predictable. The hostages are evacuating through the south exit. Mrs. Chen is located in the Eastern Wing Station 3. The override is clearly labeled. You have 9 minutes. Homelander's eyes began to glow red. Here's what I want you to understand. The recording continued, oblivious to the rage building in its audience. You're not a hero. You're a brand. And brands don't make choices based on what's right. They make choices based on what sells. The laser vision fired before Homelander consciously decided to use it. Twin beams of superheated energy cut through the projection, through the concrete wall behind it, through the support beam that happened to be load-bearing. The building groaned. Homelander froze, the glow fading from his eyes as he processed what he'd just done. Structural damage. Real structural damage. The kind that turned Megamind's threat from theatrical to genuine. From outside, news helicopters captured everything in high definition. The laser strike, the wall exploding, the building beginning to list as internal supports failed ahead of schedule. And Homelander, standing in the wreckage cape, settling around him, expression shifting from rage to something that might have been concern if it wasn't so tightly controlled. He moved fast, faster than conscious thought. The Eastern Wing Station 3, where Chen was supposedly restrained. Except when he arrived, the station was empty. A mannequin sat in the chair, the restraints clearly designed for display rather than function. A speaker crackled to life. She left through the south exit 4 minutes ago, along with everyone else. But good effort. Megamind's voice lived this time. Close. Maybe in the building, maybe broadcasting from 3 states away. Impossible to pinpoint. You've damaged the structure, which means you've created real danger, where there was only theater. Interesting choice. Very on brand. Homelander's hands clenched. The building continued its slow collapse, steel screaming as it bent. He could hear the news anchors already spinning the story. Could imagine the headlines forming. Homelander destroys rescue site. Hero or hazard. 7 stars laser vision creates crisis. He flew upward through the collapsing roof, debris raining around him, cameras tracking every movement. Landed on a nearby building where the media couldn't corner him immediately. His comm crackled. Status. Edgar's voice flat and expectant. Building's coming down. Civilians are clear. Homelander kept his tone level, professional. Suspect escaped. We're tracking social media response. It's not favorable. Homelander glanced at the news helicopters, their cameras still trained on him, broadcasting to millions. His jaw worked silently. Every instinct screamed to find Megamind and end this, consequences be damned. But Edgar's unspoken message was clear. Damage control came first, even if the damage was his own. I'm returning to tower, Homelander said. The words tasted like acid. He took off, leaving the collapsing warehouse behind. Below, emergency services moved in, containing a disaster that shouldn't have existed. That wouldn't have existed if he'd just followed the obvious script. Save people first, hunt villains second. Instead, he'd proven Megamind's entire thesis in under 5 minutes. In a control room 8 blocks away, Megamind observed the feeds from a dozen different angles. News coverage, social media reactions, even Vought's internal communications, which he'd been monitoring since this morning. The data painted a clear picture. Homelander had made a mistake. A public-recorded, undeniable mistake. And the Seven's greatest asset had just become their greatest liability. Megamind should have felt triumphant, vindicated. This was what he'd planned, for what he'd spent weeks engineering. The perfect trap sprung exactly as designed. So why did he feel hollow? He studied the replay of Homelander's laser strike. The moment when rage overrode judgment. When the mask cracked and the real person beneath became visible. It should have been satisfying. Proof that his analysis was correct, that the hero was just an actor playing a role. Instead, it felt too easy. Megamind pulled up the next phase of his plan. The live stream scheduled for tomorrow. The evidence he'd compiled about Compound 5 distribution. The media strategy that would keep pressure on Vought for another week at minimum. All of it precisely calculated, all of it designed to win. And if he won too completely, too quickly, then what? The question sat in his mind like a weight. He pushed it aside, focusing instead on the immediate metrics. Public opinion shifting. Vaught's stock dropping another 6 points. Homelander's approval rating in free fall across key demographics. Victory by every measurable standard. Megamind's reflection stared back from a dark display panel. Blue skin, an oversized skull, and eyes that had seen this pattern before. Win too well, the game ends. The game ends, the spotlight fades. The spotlight fades, and he's alone again. He shut down the feeds one by one, until only a single interface remained active. The countdown to tomorrow's broadcast. 22 hours, 14 minutes. Plenty of time to prepare, to plan, to make sure the performance justified the stage. But first, just for a moment, he sat in the darkness and let himself wonder if being right felt anything like being satisfied. The answer didn't come. Outside the city hummed with argument and analysis, millions of voices debating what they'd witnessed. Inside the warehouse, Megamind remained alone with his victory and the growing suspicion that winning wasn't actually what he wanted. It was just the only thing he knew how to do. The third broadcast didn't wait for prime time. It arrived at 6 a.m., when most of America was still deciding whether to hit snooze or face the day. Megamind appeared on every major news network simultaneously this time, without the theatrical staging. Just him standing in what looked like an ordinary warehouse, speaking directly to camera with the casual confidence of someone hosting a morning talk show. "I've been watching the coverage of last night's events." He began no preamble. The think pieces, the hot takes, the very passionate debates about whether I'm a terrorist or a performance artist. Fascinating stuff. But I noticed something missing from all that analysis. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Nobody asked if Homelander actually cared about saving anyone. They only asked if he looked good doing it. The statement landed like a grenade in a boardroom. Within minutes, cable news had pivoted from their planned segments to emergency panels. Twitter combusted. Vaught's stock opened down another 8 points. Ashley Barrett stared at the crisis center's main display, watching in real time as public sentiment fractured along new fault lines. Half the country was defending Homelander. The other half was asking uncomfortable questions. And Megamind, that blue-skinned theatrical menace, had just weaponized doubt more effectively than any bomb. "Get PR on every outlet," she barked at her assistant. "I want Homelander doing morning shows, charity events, school visits. Flood the zone with positive coverage." The assistant hesitated. "He's refusing appearances. Says he won't justify himself too, and I'm quoting some alien freak's propaganda campaign." Ashley felt something crack behind her eyes. Might have been a blood vessel. Might have been her last functional stress response. In his penthouse, Homelander stood at the window, jaw-tight, hands clenched behind his back. The view usually calmed him. The city spread below like proof of his importance, millions of lives that depended on his protection, whether they appreciated it or not. Today it looked like a jury box. His phone had been ringing since dawn. Edgar, Ashley, the marketing team, even Madeline Stillwell's replacement, whoever that was this week. All of them wanting him to smile for cameras to reassure the public, to prove that he was still their golden boy, as if he needed to prove anything to anyone. The rage that had been building since Megamind's first broadcast now had weight. Substance. It pressed against his ribs like something alive demanding release. He could find the alien. Eventually, X-ray vision could sweep entire city blocks. Enhanced hearing could filter through millions of heartbeats. But Megamind wasn't hiding. He was performing. And every search, every failed hunt, every moment Homelander spent looking made him seem more desperate. The comm unit on his table crackled. "Homelander, we need you at Tower. Now." He ignored it. 6 blocks away in a coffee shop that charged $8 for artisanal foam art. Nadia Cross sat with her laptop and a recording rig that cost more than her rent. She'd been tracking Megamind's pattern for 3 days now. The timing of broadcasts, the choice of targets, the way each reveal built on the previous one like chapters in a serialized drama. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, same as before. "Ms. Cross, enjoying your overpriced coffee?" She didn't bother looking around. If Megamind could hijack broadcast networks, tracking one journalist was child's play. "What do you want?" "Your perspective. You're one of the few people who seems to understand that I'm not actually trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to reveal what's already broken." By creating hostage situation, by creating theater that forces honest reactions. His voice carried that familiar showman energy, but underneath it's something else. Something that might have been uncertainty if aliens were capable of doubt. Tell me something. If I stopped now, would anything actually change? The question caught her off guard. You're asking me if your villain act has a point. I'm asking if winning matters when the game ends the moment you succeed. A pause. Never mind. Philosopher's problem, not yours. Wait, but the line had already gone dead. Nadia stared at her phone, then at her notes. She'd been compiling evidence of Megamind's technical capabilities, his strategic choices, his clear intelligence. But she'd missed something more fundamental. He was lonely, not in the sense of wanting companionship, in the sense of someone who'd built an elaborate stage and realized the performance was the only thing keeping him relevant. Stop performing, fade into obscurity. Keep performing, but eventually run out of material. She opened a new document and started typing. The piece wouldn't be about Megamind's crimes or capabilities. It would be about what happened to villains who actually won. At Vought Tower, Stan Edgar read the preliminary polling data with the expression of a man watching his investments depreciate in real time. Homelander's approval rating had dropped 11 points overnight. The Seven's brand value was hemorrhaging, and most concerning, the public discourse had shifted from "how do we stop this threat" to "what if the threat has a point?" That was the real damage. Not destroyed buildings or hijacked broadcasts. The idea that maybe the heroes weren't actually heroic. His phone rang. Private line, the one only a handful of people had access to. "Edgar, this is Billy Butcher." The accent was thick, British aggressive. "We need to talk about your blue-skinned problem." Edgar's expression didn't change. "I'm not in the habit of consulting with terrorists, and I'm not in the habit of calling corporate cunts, but here we are." A pause. "Your boy Homelander's losing it. We both know what happens when that laser-eyed psychopath goes off script. I've got a way to make your alien disappear permanently. You've got resources I need. Simple transaction. Why would I trust you? Because right now Megamind's making you look like idiots, and I'm the only one who gives enough of a shit about dead soups to actually pull a trigger." Butcher's voice carried casual violence, like some people carried spare change. "I don't want publicity. I want that blue fuck gone before he inspires any more freaks to try the same thing." Edgar considered this for exactly 3 seconds. "What do you need? Intel, locations, anything your surveillance has picked up that you're not sharing with the news, and immunity for my team when this goes loud." "No immunity, but I can promise limited scrutiny, provided the problem resolves quietly." Butcher laughed sharp and humorless. "Quietly, right. I'll do my best." The line disconnected. Edgar set down his phone and pulled up the file on William Butcher. Former CIA, known soup killer. Unstable, violent, and completely uncontrollable by normal corporate channels. Exactly the kind of asset you used when conventional solutions failed. Megamind had been playing a game with rules. Butcher didn't believe in rules. This might actually work. 12 blocks south in a warehouse that smelled like machine oil and ambition. Megamind ran his 19th simulation of tomorrow's broadcast. The algorithm predicted a 47% chance of viral spread, 62% engagement rate, and an 81% likelihood of forcing Vought into another visible mistake. Good numbers. Excellent numbers. The kind of success rate that should have felt satisfying. He shut down the simulation. The empty warehouse echoed with the hum of electronics and nothing else. No applause, no recognition. Just data confirming that his plan was working exactly as designed. Metro City had been like this. After defeating Metro Man, after claiming the city, after winning so completely that no one could challenge him. He'd stood in the center of his greatest triumph and felt the same hollow certainty. Victory was just another word for obsolescence. His fingers moved across the control panel, pulling up surveillance from across the city. News feeds, social media, Vaught's internal communications, courtesy of backdoors he'd installed a week ago. And there, in an encrypted call that his systems had flagged as anomalous, he found something unexpected. Stan Edgar talking to Billy Butcher. Megamind isolated the audio, cleaned it up, ran it through his analysis software. The conversation was brief, transactional, and absolutely not about negotiation or compromise. It was about elimination. For the first time since arriving in this city, Megamind felt something other than calculated confidence. A spike of genuine concern that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with survival. Butcher wasn't a corporation, wasn't a hero, wasn't someone who played for cameras or worried about approval ratings. He was a man who solved problems with violence and didn't particularly care about the aftermath. Megamind pulled up everything his systems had on the boys. The file was substantial. Vigilante group anti-Supe focus history of brutal efficiency. And at their center, William Butcher, whose dossier read like a case study in weaponized hatred. This was new. This was interesting. This was exactly the kind of variable that could end the game prematurely. Megamind's hands stilled on the controls. He should be afraid. Should be recalculating, preparing countermeasures, building contingencies. But instead he felt something uncomfortably close to relief. Someone who didn't care about the performance. Who wouldn't play by the rules of theater and publicity. Who might actually end this before Megamind had to face the question of what came after victory. He pulled up the schematics for his current location. Exit routes, defensive measures, backup systems. All of it designed for exactly this scenario. Then, he opened a new file and started composing the next broadcast. Not the one he'd planned. Something different, something that would draw Butcher out, force a confrontation, and maybe provide an ending that didn't feel like slow suffocation. The broadcast scheduled itself for 8 p.m. 6 hours to prepare. 6 hours to decide if he actually wanted to survive what came next. Megamind checked his reflection in a dark interface panel. The blue face stared back, expression unreadable even to himself. "What do you actually want?" he asked the reflection. The answer should have been simple. Recognition. Meaning. A place in the world that wasn't defined by what he lacked. But standing here alone in a warehouse with evidence that someone was actively hunting him, the honest answer was more complicated. He wanted the game to matter. Wanted the opponent to be worthy. Wanted an ending that felt earned rather than inevitable. And if Billy Butcher was coming, then maybe he'd get exactly that. Megamind pulled up the surveillance feed of the boys' last known location. A dingy basement headquarters in Brooklyn, all exposed brick and tactical equipment. He could see Butcher now pacing like a caged animal, gesturing aggressively while his team listened. No cameras, no press releases, no concern for public image. Just a man who wanted him dead and had the skills to make it happen. Megamind found himself grinning genuine this time. Not theatrical, not calculated. Just the natural expression of someone who'd been playing chess against opponents who insisted on checkers and finally found someone willing to flip the board entirely. "All right then," he said to the empty warehouse. "Let's see what you've got." The interface showed the countdown to tonight's broadcast. The city hummed beyond the walls. Somewhere out there, Butcher was planning. Homelander was seething. Vought was scrambling. And Megamind stood at the center of it all alone, with his victory and the growing certainty that he'd rather face an honest threat than another hollow triumph. He set the broadcast to auto-launch. Whatever happened in the next 6 hours, the performance would continue. The stage was set. The players were moving into position. And for the first time since arriving in this world, Megamind wasn't entirely sure he'd win. The uncertainty felt better than success ever had. The broadcast went live at 8 p.m., but this time Megamind changed the script. No warehouse, no hostages, No carefully staged moral dilemmas, just an address broadcast across every platform he'd compromised, displayed in simple white text against a black background. 1247 West 47th Street. Come alone, Homelander. Let's finish this. The challenge was so direct it almost seemed stupid. No elaborate trap, no secondary objectives, just an invitation to violence from someone who couldn't possibly win that fight, which meant it was absolutely a trap. In Vought Tower, Ashley stared at the message, then at the tactical team Edgar had assembled. He's baiting us, obviously. We send in a full team sweep. The location contained the threat before. No. Homelander's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the doorway, cape settling around him. Expression carved from marble and barely controlled fury. He wants me. He gets me. Edgar didn't look up from his tablet. That's exactly what he expects you to do. I don't care what he expects. Homelander stepped into the room and the temperature seemed to drop. I'm tired of playing his game. Tired of watching him make a mockery of everything we've built. This ends tonight. You're emotionally compromised. I'm effective. Homelander's eyes began to glow just slightly. Warning rather than threat. Unless you'd prefer I stay here while some blue-skinned freak continues destroying our reputation one broadcast at a time. The glow faded. Edgar held his gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded once. Cameras stay grounded, no media presence. If this goes wrong, we contain the footage. Homelander was already moving toward the window. It won't go wrong. He launched into the night sky, sonic boom-rattling glass across 3 blocks. Below the city, spread out like a circuit board, millions of lights marking millions of lives that depended on him whether they knew it or not. 1247 West 47th Street. Old industrial district, abandoned for years. The perfect location for a confrontation that wouldn't endanger civilians, or the perfect location to make him look like a thug beating up someone in an empty building. Homelander descended fast, no theatrical landing this time. Just speed and precision boots hitting concrete hard enough to crack it. The building loomed above him dark, except for a single light on the 3rd floor. Theatrical to the end. He walked through the entrance, not bothering with the door. The wall exploded inward under his shoulder rebar, and concrete yielding like cardboard. His X-ray vision swept the interior, looking for heartbeats, heat signatures, anything organic. Nothing. Just electronics. Cameras. And on the 3rd floor, a single figure standing beneath that spotlight. Homelander flew up through the floors, punching through each level rather than taking stairs. Debris rained down. Support beams groaned. He didn't care. This ended now. The figure stood waiting exactly as promised. Blue skin, oversized skull, that insufferable theatrical cape. Megamind apparently alone, apparently unarmed. Took you long enough, the alien said. I was beginning to think you'd send lawyers instead. Homelander's eyes blazed red. Last chance. Surrender now, face trial, and maybe you survive in a cell. Or what, you'll kill me. Megamind spread his arms wide, inviting. Go ahead. Make me a martyr. I'm sure that'll help your approval ratings. The laser vision fired. Twin beams of superheated energy cut through Megamind's chest, through the wall behind him, through the support column that shouldn't have been there. The alien's body flickered pixelated, then vanished entirely. Hologram. Again. Predictable. Megamind's voice echoed through the space, coming from everywhere and nowhere. You know what your problem is, Homelander. You're so used to being the strongest thing in the room that you forgot how to think. The lights died. Emergency backups kicked in immediately, but wrong. Too bright. Strobing at a frequency that shouldn't have been perceptible to human eyes, but to enhanced vision, registered as physically painful. Homelander's hand went to his face, squinting against the assault. His hearing picked up the next attack before he understood it. High-frequency sound pitched beyond normal range, but his enhanced senses caught every oscillation. It felt like wasps inside his skull. Sensory overload. Megamind's voice continued calm and educational. Your powers are incredible. But power without control is just noise, and noise can be weaponized. Homelander staggered, trying to filter out the input, trying to focus through the pain that shouldn't exist, because nothing hurt him. Nothing could hurt him, except this was different. This wasn't damage. This was spam. Every sense he relied on screaming contradictory information. He fired again, sweeping the room with laser vision. Concrete exploded. Steel melted. The building groaned as more supports failed. There it is, Megamind said. The real you, not the hero, not the protector. Just a scared child with too much power and not enough purpose. Shut up! Homelander's voice came out strangled. Shut up, shut up, shut up! The audio cut suddenly. The light stabilized to something tolerable. And in the silence that followed, Homelander heard something new. A heartbeat, human, weak, coming from the floor below. He crashed through the concrete, desperate for something real to focus on. Found her in the corner, a woman in civilian clothes, and zip-tied eyes wide with genuine terror. Not an actor this time. Real fear. Real danger. A camera drone hovered nearby, red light blinking, recording. Smile for your audience, Megamind's voice said softly. They're watching. Homelander froze. This was the trap. The real one, not the sensory assault, not the structural damage. This, a civilian in danger, a camera recording, and Homelander standing over her with his eyes still glowing red from the last laser burst. The optics were catastrophic. He took a breath, forced the glow to fade, extended a hand to help her up, movements careful, controlled. Playing the hero even as every instinct screamed to find Megamind and turn him into a stain. It's okay, he said, voice modulated to that practiced warmth. You're safe now. The woman scrambled away from him, not toward him, away. Like he was the threat. The camera caught that too. Homelander's jaw clenched. He turned toward the drone hand, raising about to swat it from the air, and stopped, because destroying it would look worse than anything it had recorded. Would confirm every accusation Megamind had made. Would prove he cared more about his image than actual heroism. He was trapped by optics, and he knew it, and knowing it made the rage burn hotter. Where are you? The words came out tight, controlled. Come out and face me. I'm already facing you. Megamind's voice shifted closer now. I've been facing you since the first broadcast. The question is whether you're capable of seeing anything beyond your own reflection. A door opened across the room. Not a hologram. Not a projection. Megamind himself standing in the entrance, hands clasped behind his back like a professor delivering a lecture. Real, vulnerable, utterly insane. Homelander moved without thinking. Crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. Grabbed Megamind by the throat. Lifted him off the ground with one hand, fingers tightening around that blue neck. The alien didn't struggle, just met his eyes' expression calm. Do it, Megamind said. Kill me. Prove everything I've said about you. Show the world that when the cameras are watching and the spotlight's on, you're exactly the monster you pretend not to be. Homelander's grip tightened. The alien's pulse fluttered against his palm. Real. Organic. Killable. The drone circled closer, recording from 3 different angles. You think you're clever? Homelander's voice dropped to a whisper. Think you've trapped me? But I could snap your neck right now and call it justified force. Alien invader, terrorist, threat to national security. You could. Megamind's voice was getting thinner, harder to force out. But you won't. Because you need me. I need you. You need a villain. Someone to fight. Someone to define yourself against. I end, your purpose ends. And we both know you're terrified of irrelevance more than anything else in this world. Homelander's hand shook. Not from effort, from restraint. Because the alien was right. In Metro City, Megamind had defeated Metro Man and found victory hollow. Here, if Homelander killed him, proved himself the superior force, then what? Back to manufactured threats and scripted heroics. Back to saving cats from trees while pretending it mattered. The rage crystallized into something colder, more calculated. He dropped Megamind, let the alien crumple to the floor, gasping. "You're not worth it," Homelander said, loud enough for the cameras. "You're just a sad little creature desperate for attention. I'm not going to give you the martyrdom you want." He turned to the civilian woman, helped her to her feet with exaggerated gentleness. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still terrified, but at least not running anymore. "Then let's get you out of here." He guided her toward the exit, aware of the cameras tracking every movement. Playing the role, hating every second. But playing it because the alternative was proving Megamind right. Behind him, the alien coughed, voice raw. "You're learning, good. But the lesson isn't over." Homelander paused at the doorway. "It is for tonight." "Tonight, yes. But ask yourself something before you leave." Megamind pushed himself to sitting, one hand massaging his throat. "Why did you hesitate? Was it because killing me would look bad? Or because some part of you actually questions whether I'm wrong?" Homelander didn't answer. Just took off through the damaged building, the woman held carefully in his arms, cape streaming behind him. Professional, controlled. Exactly what the cameras needed to see. But inside, where no one could observe, the question festered. Megamind remained on the floor for 30 seconds after Homelander's departure. The sensory equipment powered down. The drone stopped recording. The civilian woman, a volunteer actress paid well and thoroughly debriefed, had already left through the secondary exit. He was alone. His hand went to his throat, feeling the bruises already forming. Real damage. Real pain. He'd calculated the risk, planned for the possibility of injury. But feeling Homelander's fingers tightening around his neck had been different from running simulations. For approximately 4 seconds, he genuinely thought he might die. And in those 4 seconds, he'd felt more alive than during any of his victories. Megamind stood slowly, testing his balance. The building groaned around him, structural integrity compromised by Homelander's rampage. He needed to leave before it collapsed. But first, he pulled up the footage from the drones. The stream had gone out live naturally. Millions had watched. The metrics were already flooding in. Public opinion fragmenting further. Homelander's approval ratings in free fall. Vought's stock dropping another 12 points. Victory by every quantifiable measure. Megamind shut down the feeds. The warehouse was silent, except for creaking metal. And his own breathing still rough from the choking. He'd won this round. Forced Homelander to show restraint for the wrong reasons. Proven that heroism was just another performance. So why did his chest feel hollow? The answer came with uncomfortable clarity. Because winning the argument didn't answer the question. What happened after he'd proven everything he set out to prove? After Vought collapsed? After the Seven's reputation burned? After he'd revealed that heroes were just products and villains were just performers? He'd be exactly where he started. Alone. Purposeless. Desperately searching for the next opponent to validate his existence. "You're pathetic," he told his reflection in a cracked display panel. The reflection didn't disagree. Outside, sirens were approaching. Emergency services, probably. Maybe Vought cleanup crews. Definitely time to leave. Megamind activated his exit protocol drones, powering down equipment, initiating self-destruct sequences that would erase evidence without causing additional casualties. Everything precise, everything calculated, everything empty. He walked through the damaged building, past the spot where Homelander had grabbed him, out into the night air. The city hummed with a million conversations, most of them probably about tonight's broadcast. About the confrontation, about what it meant. None of them about the blue-skinned alien who stood on a rooftop alone with his victory, wondering if winning was just another word for losing slowly. Megamind pulled up his comm unit. The next broadcast was scheduled for tomorrow. He could cancel it, could walk away right now, declare victory and vanish into whatever new identity he invented. But then what? His finger hovered over the cancel button for 3 full seconds. Then he scheduled the broadcast and added a new variable to tomorrow's plan. Something riskier. Something that might actually force an ending one way or another. Because uncertainty was better than emptiness, and if he had to burn everything down to feel something real, then at least the flames would be spectacular. The new variable Megamind had planned was simple. A data dump. Compound V distribution records, internal VOT communications, financial flows that connected the 7 to every covered-up atrocity of the past decade. Not theatrical, just information released systematically to maximize damage. He'd scheduled the first leak for 9 a.m. Time to hit morning news cycles. Designed to keep VOT scrambling, keep the game moving, keep the spotlight burning. The plan lasted until 3:47 a.m. when his security perimeter reported an unauthorized breach, not Homelander. The signature was wrong. Too low to the ground, moving with tactical precision rather than superhuman arrogance. 4 separate heat signatures, armed coordinating through hand signals rather than comms. Professional, military, dangerous. Megamind pulled up the external feeds, enhancing the low-light imagery. Got a clear view of the team 30 seconds before they hit his primary entrance. The leader was unmistakable. Tall, dark coat, moving with the kind of casual violence that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times. Billy Butcher. And behind him, 3 others whose files Megamind had skimmed but never considered urgent. Until now. Bloody hell. Butcher's voice came through clearly on the audio feed. He's set up like a Bond villain. Frenchie, you seeing this? A smaller figure crouched near the entrance, examining the lock mechanism. We. Very sophisticated. Military-grade encryption, yes, but with civilian components. He built this himself. Can you crack it? I can blow it. Then blow it. Megamind had approximately 40 seconds before they breached. 40 seconds to decide whether to trigger his defensive measures, non-lethal but messy, or let them in and see what happened when someone ignored the script entirely. The choice was easier than it should have been. He opened the door remotely, killed the lights, and activated the intercom. Mr. Butcher, punctual, I appreciate that in an assassin. The tactical flashlight swept the interior, finding nothing but empty space and dark equipment. Butcher's laugh came out harsh. Assassin, that's a fancy word for it. He gestured to his team. Mother's Milk, take the perimeter. Kimiko, upper level. Frenchie, you're with me. They moved with practiced efficiency, spreading through the warehouse like they'd rehearsed it, which they probably had using whatever intelligence Edgar had provided. Megamind tracked them through internal sensors, watching the pattern. They weren't here to talk, weren't here to arrest. They were here to end the problem, and from Butcher's body language, he'd prefer it messy. You've got me at a disadvantage, Megamind said through the speaker's voice echoing from multiple sources. You know why you're here. I'm still guessing. Then let me educate you. Butcher stopped in the center of the space, scanning for targets. You're a distraction, a sideshow. And while you've been playing villain on the telly, you've made my job harder. So here's what happens next. You surrender, we disappear. You somewhere quiet, and the world forgets you existed. Or you resist, we kill you, and the world forgets you existed. Either way, you're done. Ah, the Edgar solution. Eliminate the variable that doesn't fit the equation. Megamind considered his options. Butcher was armed with something that looked designed to kill Soups. Probably assumed it would work on aliens, too. Tell me something. Do you actually care about stopping me, or do you just hate that I'm making Vought look bad without your permission? Butcher's jaw tightened. I hate Soups. I hate the cunts who make them. And I especially hate clever pricks who think they can walk into my city and start a revolution like it's a bloody TED Talk. Your city, my war. Butcher's hand moved to his weapon. You're just collateral damage. The honesty was almost refreshing. No moral posturing. No claims of heroism. Just a man who wanted control of his vendetta and saw Megamind as competition. I have information you want, Megamind said. Vought data, compound V distribution networks, names, locations, evidence that would make your little crusade significantly easier. I'll get that after you're dead. Maybe, if you can crack my encryption before it auto-wipes. Which respectfully you can't. Megamind pulled up a holographic display in the center of the room. Files scrolling past too fast to read. 5 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking. Intel for immunity. Simple transaction. Butcher stared at the display, calculating. Mother's Milk's voice came through his earpiece, tinny but clear. It's a trap. Of course it's a bloody trap. Butcher lowered his weapon slightly. Not holstered, just less immediately threatening. 5 minutes. Then I decide if you're more useful as a corpse or a source. The lights came up gradually. Not theatrical this time. Just functional illumination revealing Megamind, standing on an elevated platform, hands visible and empty. No cape. No costume. Just the alien in casual clothes that somehow made him look more vulnerable than any performance had. I'm not your enemy, Megamind said. I know you think I am. But we want the same thing. We want nothing alike. We both want Vought exposed. The Seven humiliated. The system that creates and protects monsters to collapse. Megamind descended from the platform slowly, hands still visible. The difference is methodology. You prefer crowbars and bullets. I prefer cameras and humiliation. But the goal is identical. Butcher's expression didn't change. You want exposure, I want bodies, not the same. Fair distinction. Megamind reached his control panel, fingers dancing across the interface. Data began flowing to an external drive, the kind that couldn't be traced once disconnected. But bodies without evidence just make martyrs. Evidence without bodies makes the system invulnerable. You need both. And you're offering this, why out of the goodness of your oversized heart? Because I'm going to lose. The admission came out quieter than intended. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Vought has resources I can't match. Homelander has power I can't counter, and you... He gestured at Butcher and his team. You represent the variable I didn't account for. Someone who doesn't care about the performance. Butcher tilted his head, studying the alien like a predator evaluating wounded prey. You're scared. I'm realistic. There's a difference. Nah. You're scared. I can smell it. Butcher stepped closer, weapon still ready but no longer aimed. That whole villain act, the broadcast, the theatrical bollocks, you've been playing a character. But right now, you're just some blue alien prick who realizes he's in over his head. Megamind met his eyes. Does the accuracy of your assessment change, whether you shoot me? Depends. You gonna keep making my job harder? That was never my intent. Wasn't asking about intent, asking about outcome. Butcher grabbed the data drive, pocketed it without looking. See, here's your problem. You came to my city, started a war with the biggest cunts in it, and thought you could control how it ended. But wars don't end clean. They end messy. And the people who start them rarely survive to see the credits roll. The truth hit harder than expected. Because Butcher was right. Megamind had orchestrated everything. The broadcasts, the traps, the psychological warfare, believing he could maintain control through superior planning. But Butcher represented chaos. Pure, undirected violence that didn't care about narrative arcs or satisfying conclusions. So what happens now? Megamind asked. Butcher considered this for a long moment. Then he turned to Frenchie. Plant charges on the support columns. Make it look structural. Wait. Relax. You get 60 seconds to evacuate. More than generous, considering. Butcher headed for the exit team, falling in around him. Here's the deal. You disappear. Tonight. This warehouse burns, your equipment gets buried, and the blue-skinned menace becomes an unsolved mystery. You try this shit again anywhere I can reach, I finish what I'm starting now. And the data, I'll use it. My way, not yours. Butcher paused at the door. You wanted to expose Vought. Congratulations, you did. But you don't get to control what happens next. That's not how revolution works. The team was gone before Megamind could respond. 30 seconds later, he heard the distinct sound of charges being placed. Professional. Precise. Designed to bring the building down without killing him if he moved quickly. He should run. Should grab what equipment he could salvage and evacuate. Should accept that his carefully constructed game had just been ended by someone who refused to play. Instead, he stood there for 10 seconds absorbing the reality. He'd lost control. Not to Homelander's power. Not to Vaught's resources. To a man with a crowbar and no interest in performance art. The charges beeped, counting down. Megamind grabbed his primary backup drives and ran. He made it out with 18 seconds to spare. The warehouse collapsed behind him. Explosives placed with surgical precision to ensure maximum structural failure. No fire, just concrete and steel folding inward like a failed souffle. Professional work. The kind that made a statement without unnecessary drama. Megamind stood in the alley across the street, watching his carefully constructed base of operations become rubble. The equipment, the feeds, the control systems he'd spent weeks building. Gone in 90 seconds because someone decided the show was over. His comm unit buzzed. Unknown number. Megamind. Butcher's voice calling from a moving vehicle, judging by the background noise. One more thing. What? That data you gave me. The Compound 5 networks the cover-ups, all of it. I'm using it to burn them down. Not for justice, not for exposure. For revenge. You helped me do that whether you meant to or not. And you're telling me this because you were right about one thing. We did want the same outcome. We just disagreed on who gets credit. A pause. You started something you can't control. Welcome to the club. Now stay the fuck out of my way. The line went dead. Megamind pocketed the comm unit. Checked his backup drives. The data was intact. His primary planning files, his research on the 7, his contingencies, everything except the stage he'd built to perform on. Butcher had taken that. Dismantled it. Not through superior strategy or brilliant tactics, but through simple refusal to participate in theater. Just walked in, took what he needed, and ended the performance by destroying the venue. It should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like reality checking in after a long fever dream. Megamind started walking no particular destination in mind. The city moved around him, indifferent to his existence. A few people glanced at his blue skin, but most ignored him. Just another freak in a city full of them. His original plan was in ruins. His equipment destroyed. His carefully orchestrated campaign interrupted by blunt force and explosives. But the data was out there now. In Butcher's hands, yes, but out there. Being used. Making a difference in ways Megamind couldn't control or direct. He should have hated that. Should have felt the hollow victory sensation, the emptiness of winning, without being able to claim credit. Instead, he felt something uncomfortably close to relief. Because for the first time since arriving in this city, something had happened that wasn't according to his script. Someone had looked at his performance and said, "No thanks," and blown up his stage and walked away. And now Megamind had to figure out what came next without a plan, without a venue, without control. The uncertainty should have been terrifying. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks. The data leak hit at 6 a.m. 3 hours earlier than Megamind had planned, and infinitely messier than he would have executed. No careful staging, no measured reveals, Just a document dump uploaded to 24 independent news sites, simultaneously accompanied by a single-sentence message. Vaught's been lying. Here's proof. No signature. No theatrical flourish. Just evidence raw and damning dropped like a bomb in the middle of morning news cycles. Butcher's style. Blunt, effective, completely indifferent to narrative control. Nadia Cross was in her third cup of coffee when the first notification hit. She opened the files, scanned the headers, and felt her pulse spike. Compound V distribution records, internal memos discussing acceptable civilian casualties, financial transfers to silence victims, NDAs backed by death threats. This was the Holy Grail. The kind of evidence journalists spent careers chasing. And it had just been handed to her by someone who didn't care about credit. She started writing immediately, fingers flying across the keyboard. No time for analysis, no room for hesitation. Just transcription, verification, publication before Vaught's legal team could mobilize. The story went live at 6:47 a.m. By 7:15, it had been picked up by major networks. By 8, cable news had pivoted from scheduled programming to emergency coverage. By 900, Vaught's stock had entered freefall. At Vaught Tower, Ashley Barrett experienced what medical professionals would later describe as a stress-induced cardiac event. She survived, but her career didn't. By noon, she'd been replaced by someone whose primary qualification was looking calm on camera while the world burned. Stan Edgar sat in his office, reading the coverage with the expression of a man watching a controlled demolition go catastrophically wrong. The data was authentic, undeniable, and far too specific to dismiss as fabrication. Someone inside had compiled this. Someone with access to systems that should have been impenetrable. His phone rang. Board members demanding answers. Senators demanding distance. Marketing teams demanding miracles. Edgar ignored all of them. The game had changed. Damage control was no longer about managing perception. It was about survival. He pulled up Homelander's location data. The tracker showed him at the penthouse, stationary, which meant either planning or sulking. And Edgar suspected the latter. "Get him on comms," Edgar said to his assistant. "Sir, he's not responding to..." "Then go to the penthouse and knock on the door. Tell him if he's not in this office in 10 minutes, his endorsement deals terminate at noon." The assistant left. Edgar returned to the data leak, reading through the files, methodically. Financial crimes, cover-ups, deaths, all documented with the kind of precision that suggested someone had been planning this release for years. Except it hadn't been years. It had been weeks. And the someone was a blue-skinned alien who'd apparently shared his intelligence with the one group even less concerned about optics than Homelander. Edgar pulled up the surveillance from the warehouse bombing, reviewed the footage. Butcher's team had been professional, surgical. They'd taken what they needed and eliminated the source in under 6 minutes. Efficient, but not complete, because the alien was still out there. Somewhere. No longer broadcasting, no longer orchestrating, but alive and presumably watching as his data burned through Vaught's carefully constructed firewall of legitimacy. The question was what he'd do next. 8 blocks away in a motel room that charged by the hour and asked no questions. Megamind sat cross-legged on a bed that smelled like industrial cleaner and poor decisions. His laptop, a cheap civilian model, nothing like his previous equipment, displayed 20 different news feeds simultaneously. He watched Butcher's leak detonate across media landscape, watched Vaught's stock crater, watched pundits dissect evidence he'd compiled, drawing conclusions he'd predicted. Everything was happening exactly as he'd calculated, except he wasn't the one making it happen. Butcher had taken his data and used it like a weapon. No careful timing. No strategic reveals, just maximum damage deployed with the subtlety of a pipe bomb. And somehow, it was working better than Megamind's theatrical approach ever had. Because people didn't want performance, they wanted blood. His phone buzzed. Nadia Cross calling from a number she'd given him after the third broadcast. He answered. "You're watching," she said. "Not a question. Hard to miss. This is your data. Your work." Her voice carried accusation mixed with something that might have been admiration. "Why give it to Butcher instead of releasing it yourself?" "I didn't give it to him. He took it." Megamind shut the laptop, suddenly tired of watching his victory play out without him. "And he's using it more effectively than I could have. No theater, no speeches. Just evidence and consequences. You sound almost pleased." "I sound realistic." He stood pacing the tiny room. "I wanted to expose Vought. That's happening. The fact that I'm not conducting the orchestra doesn't change the music. But you wanted credit, recognition. That's what the broadcasts were about, maybe." The admission tasted strange. Or maybe I wanted purpose and confused the two. Nadia was silent for a moment. "What happens now, for you, I mean?" "I adapt or I disappear, haven't decided yet. For what it's worth, you started something important. Even if Butcher's finishing it." The line went dead before Megamind could respond. He stared at the phone, then at his reflection in the darkened laptop screen. Blue skin, oversized skull. An alien in a cheap motel room watching someone else claim his revolution. This should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like graduation. At Vought Tower, Homelander arrived 14 minutes late, cape, disheveled eyes, carrying the red tint that meant he'd been close to using them recently. He walked into Edgar's office without knocking, without preamble. "You wanted to see me?" Edgar gestured at the display showing news coverage. "Have you been following this?" "Kinda hard not to." Homelander's voice was tight, controlled. The kind of control that came right before explosions. Some asshole leaked classified data, and now every 2-bit reporter thinks they're Woodward and Bernstein. That asshole had help. From inside our organization. Edgar pulled up a technical analysis. The data's too complete, too specific. Someone with administrator access compiled this over weeks, maybe months. So find them, and they're already gone. Disappeared the same night their warehouse was destroyed. Edgar closed the file. "We're not here to discuss attribution. We're here to discuss response." "Response." Homelander laughed, sharp and humorless. "What response? The data's out. Public opinion's already made up their minds. What do you want me to do? Smile for cameras and pretend everything's fine?" "Yes, exactly that." "No." The word came out flat, final. "I'm done playing PR games while everyone treats me like I'm the problem. You want a response? Here's a response. I'm going on every network that'll have me and telling them the truth. That Vought made me. The compound Vive made all of us. That if people want someone to blame, they can start with you." Edgar's expression didn't change. "That would be inadvisable." "I don't care about your advice anymore." Homelander turned toward the door. "I'm not your product. I'm not your brand. I'm the only thing standing between this city and chaos, and if that means burning down the company that made me, so be it." He left before Edgar could respond. The door slammed hard enough to crack the frame. Edgar sat alone in his office, listening to the silence. Then he pulled up Homelander's contract. The termination clauses, the liability protections, the contingencies built in for exactly this scenario. If Homelander went rogue, truly rogue, there were protocols. None of them pleasant. All of them expensive. But better than letting an unstable soup destroy everything they'd built. He made the call to legal. Started the process, and hoped it wouldn't come to that. 3 hours later, Homelander appeared on GNN's evening broadcast. Live, unscripted. The network had been scrambling for a statement since the leak broke, and when America's greatest hero called personally requesting airtime, they'd cleared the schedule. The interview started civil. Standard questions about the allegations. Vaught's response. Homelander's role in recent events? Then the anchor made a mistake. Some are saying that the Seven knew about Compound V's distribution to civilians. That you're complicit in... Complicit? Homelander's eyes flashed. Not quite glowing, but close. I was made in a lab, injected with experimental drugs before I could walk, raised by scientists who tested my abilities like I was equipment. And you want to ask me about complicity? The anchor backpedaled. I'm just reporting what... You're reporting propaganda. The same sanitized version Vought's been selling for decades. But here's the truth. Homelander leaned forward, voice dropping to something between confession and threat. Every soup you've ever seen was manufactured, created, sold to you as heroes when we're really just weapons with good PR. And if that makes you uncomfortable good, you should be uncomfortable. The control room was screaming into the anchor's earpiece. Cut to commercial, end the interview. But the anchor, either brave or stupid, pushed forward. Are you saying the Seven are dangerous? I'm saying we're powerful. And power without accountability is just violence waiting for an excuse. Homelander stood towering over the desk. You wanted to know if I'm complicit. I'm guilty. We're all guilty. Vought created us. You bought the fantasy. And now everyone's surprised when the mask slips and you see what's underneath. He walked off the set mid-broadcast. Left the anchor stammering. Left the network in chaos. Left millions of viewers with the image of their greatest hero admitting he was exactly what they'd been afraid he might be. The clip went viral within minutes. Hashtags exploded. Homelander breakdown. Seven exposed. Vought collapse. And in a cheap motel room, Megamind watched the footage replay, feeling something he hadn't expected. Pity, not for Vought, not for the system burning down around them, but for Homelander trapped by the same need for recognition that Megamind understood too well. The difference was Megamind had chosen his performance, had built his stage deliberately. Homelander had been scripted from birth and was only now realizing he'd never had a choice. Megamind shut the laptop, packed his few belongings. The motel room had served its purpose. Time to move before Vought's inevitable manhunt widened to include blue-skinned witnesses. He didn't know where he'd go. Didn't have a plan beyond survive the next 24 hours. His equipment was destroyed. His network dismantled. His carefully constructed campaign had been co-opted by people who didn't care about narrative control. Everything he'd built was gone. And standing there, in a room that smelled like failure and cheap disinfectant, Megamind felt lighter than he had in weeks. Because he'd spent his entire life performing. Playing the villain. Creating elaborate stages to justify his existence. And in the end, the most important thing he'd done was hand his work to someone else and walk away. Not victory, not defeat. Just the end of a performance that had outlived its meaning. He left the motel without checking out. Walked into the city night, one more strange face in a metropolis full of them. No cape, no spotlight, no audience. Just an alien figuring out what came after the curtain fell. The uncertainty should have been terrifying. It felt like freedom. 3 days after Homelander's broadcast breakdown, Vought International announced a restructuring. The language was corporate and sanitized, but the meaning was clear. Stan Edgar had been removed as CEO. Homelander had been placed on indefinite administrative leave. The Seven would be undergoing comprehensive review. Translated from corporate speak, the ship was sinking and they were throwing out ballast. The announcement made headlines for exactly 4 hours before being buried under the next wave of leaked documents. Butcher, it seemed, had more data than Megamind had initially provided. Or he was simply releasing it in smaller doses, keeping Vought bleeding rather than letting them collapse all at once. Smart, cruel, effective. Megamind watched the coverage from a coffee shop in Brooklyn, laptop open, nursing a drink that cost too much and tasted like burnt disappointment. Around him, other customers were absorbed in their phones, probably reading the same news he was tracking. Nobody glanced at his blue skin. Nobody cared. In Metro City, his alien features had made him instantly recognizable. Here he was just another freak in a city that specialized in them. His phone buzzed. Nadia Cross, texting instead of calling this time. "Coffee shop on 5th and Bergen. If you're still in the city, we should talk." Megamind glanced up. Spotted her 3 tables away, laptop open, pretending not to watch him. He couldn't help but grin. Of course she'd tracked him. He'd have done the same. He picked up his coffee and walked over. "You're persistent. You're predictable." She gestured at the empty chair. "Sit. I'm not recording if that helps. Should I be worried you found me? Should I be worried you let me?" Nadia closed her laptop. "I've been following your pattern. The motel, the movement. You're staying in the city. That's interesting. Is it? Most people in your situation would run. Leave the country. Find somewhere Vaught's influence doesn't reach." She studied him carefully. "But you're still here, watching. So either you're stupid or you're not done yet." Megamind took a drink, buying time to consider his response. What if I'm just curious how it ends? Endings are for stories. Real life just keeps going. Nadia leaned forward. "I wanted to thank you for the data, even if Butcher's the one using it now. I didn't give it to you. You gave it to someone. Same result." She pulled out a tablet, showed him the latest article. "Vaught's losing ground in 14 states. Federal investigations opening in 6. Class action lawsuits filing faster than their legal team can respond. You did that. Butcher did that. You started it." She shut off the tablet. "And now you're hiding in coffee shops watching someone else finish your revolution." How does that feel? The question was more complicated than she knew. Megamind set down his coffee, considering honesty for once. "Like I missed the point entirely," he said finally. "I wanted to be seen, to matter, to prove that I wasn't just some accident from a failed planet. But mattering isn't the same as being right. And being right doesn't require an audience." Nadia absorbed this. "So what happens now? You disappear? Start over somewhere else? Maybe?" He glanced at the news coverage playing on a screen behind the counter. Homelander's face looking haunted and furious in equal measure. "Or maybe I figure out what being a villain means when the curtain's already down." That's surprisingly philosophical for someone who spent 2 weeks making the most powerful corporation in America look like idiots. "I contain multitudes." Megamind stood, leaving his coffee half-finished. "Thank you for the conversation, and for not immediately calling Vaught's security. I'm a journalist, not a snitch." Nadia handed him a business card. "If you decide you want your story told properly, call me. No theatrics, no performance, just the truth." Megamind pocketed the card without looking at it. "I'll consider it." He left before she could push further. Outside, the city moved with its usual indifferent rhythm. Millions of lives, intersecting, none of them particularly concerned with blue-skinned aliens or fallen corporate empires. It should have felt diminishing. Instead, it felt honest. Across town in a penthouse that had never felt like home. Homelander stood at the window and watched the city pretend he didn't exist. No news helicopters following his movements. No crowds gathering when he flew overhead. Even the paparazzi had moved on to easier targets. He'd wanted them to see him. The real him. Not the manufactured hero, but the actual person underneath. Turns out they didn't like what they saw. His phone had been ringing for 3 days straight. Edgar. Legal. PR teams desperate to manage the fallout. He'd ignored all of them. What was the point? They wanted him to smile and apologize and promise to be better. They wanted the performance to continue. But Megamind had been right about one thing. The performance was exhausting. Homelander pulled out his phone. Not to answer the calls, to search for the alien's last known location. X-ray vision could only cover so much territory, and Megamind had proven frustratingly good at staying hidden when he wanted to. But someone had to be responsible for this mess. Someone had to pay for making him look weak. The search came up empty. Again, Homelander threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, expensive components scattering across marble floor. In the silence that followed, he realized something uncomfortable. He wasn't angry at Megamind. Not really. He was angry at himself for proving every accusation true. The blue-skinned freak had held up a mirror. Homelander had smashed it. And now he was left with the fragments, each one reflecting a truth he'd spent years avoiding. He was powerful. He was famous. He was utterly alone. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know how to fix it. In a basement in Brooklyn that smelled like gun oil and old resentment, Billy Butcher reviewed the latest leak with satisfaction. The Compound 5 distribution network was unraveling. Federal prosecutors were circling. Vaught's stock had dropped 42% in 3 days. Beautiful chaos, exactly what he'd wanted. Frenchie entered carrying coffee that was somehow worse than the stuff Megamind had been drinking. The news, it says Homelander may face charges. Criminal negligence, yes. They'll never make it stick. Butcher didn't look up from his laptop. But the threat's enough. Makes him radioactive. Makes Vought desperate. And when they are desperate, they make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, we make corpses. Butcher closed the laptop. The alien did us a favor. Whether he meant to or not. You think he meant to? Butcher considered this. I think he wanted to matter. Wanted to be remembered. Same as any of us. Difference is he was smart enough to know when to quit. He is still alive, yes, still in the city. Probably. But he's not my problem anymore. Butcher stood stretching. He wanted revolution. He got it. What he does with his freedom after that's his business. Mother's Milk appeared in the doorway. We got movement. Vought Security's been mobilizing. Looks like they're going after something. Or someone. Butcher grinned. Then let's go see what they're so worried about. The team moved out, leaving the basement empty, except for scattered equipment and the lingering smell of violence waiting to happen. On a rooftop 12 blocks away, Megamind sat with his legs dangling over the edge, watching the city lights flicker like a circuit board coming to life. He'd climbed up here with no particular goal, just a need for height. For perspective. From up here, Vought Tower looked smaller. Homelander's penthouse was just another lit window among thousands. The chaos he'd caused was invisible from this distance, reduced to abstract concepts playing out on screens in boardrooms. He'd won. Not the way he planned. Not with the recognition he'd wanted. But Vought was burning. The Seven were exposed. The system that created and protected monsters was being torn apart piece by piece, and he was sitting on a rooftop, anonymous and irrelevant, feeling more satisfied than any theatrical victory had ever provided. His comm unit buzzed. He'd almost forgotten he still had it. The device was basic, nothing like his previous equipment, but functional. Unknown number. He answered. Megamind. Homelander's voice tight with controlled fury. I know you're still here. I know you're watching. And I want you to understand something. Megamind waited. You were right about all of it. The performance, the product, the mask. A pause. But you made one mistake. What's that? You thought exposing the truth would matter. That people would care. They don't. They never do. Homelander's voice dropped to something almost vulnerable. We're both alone now. You destroyed your stage. I destroyed my image. And in the end, nothing changed except we're both miserable. I'm not miserable. Liar. The word came out bitter. I can hear it in your voice. You miss the spotlight. You miss mattering, same as me. Megamind looked out at the city, considering the accusation. Maybe I do. But missing something doesn't mean I need it back. Then what do you need? I'm still figuring that out. The line went silent for 3 seconds. Then Homelander laughed, harsh and empty. Good luck with that. The connection cut. Megamind set down the comm unit. Homelander was wrong about one thing. The truth did matter. Just not the way either of them had expected. It mattered quietly, persistently, in courtrooms and investigations and congressional hearings. Not theatrical, not immediate, but real. He stood checking the time. Almost midnight. The city never actually slept, but it pretended to around this hour. Fewer people, less noise, better for thinking. Megamind pulled out a small spray can he'd bought from a hardware store earlier. Nothing fancy, just basic paint. He shook it once, testing, then walked to the rooftop's edge where the wall faced the street. In quick, efficient strokes, he wrote a message. Not elaborate, not theatrical. Just 7 words in simple block letters. The villain you deserve is gone. Not quite true. He wasn't gone. But the villain he'd been pretending to be, the theatrical showman who needed audiences and recognition, that version was finished. What came next, he didn't know. But standing here alone on a rooftop, having changed the world without getting credit for it, felt closer to honest than anything he'd done in Metro City. Megamind climbed down through a fire escape, leaving the message for whoever found it. Morning joggers, probably. Or maintenance crews. People who wouldn't understand what it meant. That was fine. It wasn't for them. It was for him. A marker, an ending, and maybe eventually a beginning. The city swallowed him as he walked into its depths, just another strange face in a metropolis built on them. No cape, no spotlight, no audience. Just an alien figuring out what villains did when the performance ended, and life kept going anyway. The uncertainty ahead should have been terrifying. It felt like the first honest thing he'd experienced in years. Behind him, the message waited on the rooftop wall. 7 words spray-painted in crude letters already starting to dry. By morning, someone would photograph it, post it online, try to analyze what it meant. They'd probably get it wrong. That was fine too. The story was over. The villain had left the stage. What happened next was no longer his problem. A villain armed with a genius mind launches a daring incursion into Vought. He is Megamind, a blue-skinned alien who delights in playing the bad guy, mischievous and sharp-witted rather than cruel. This time, Homelander has no reason to fear his throne being challenged. Megamind is not powerful. He has no extraordinary abilities. He has no interest in being a hero. What he does possess is a superlative intellect, and through his criminal maneuvers, he begins to expose Vought's true face. In the end, it is Homelander who takes the hit, stripped of the glory and reverence that once defined him. Megamind, meanwhile, vanishes, leaving behind no body, no legacy, and no proof that he ever existed in this world at all.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time in this channel.